Bloodborne is seen as a masterpiece by those who have played it. I am sure you've all heard that by now over the past 10 years since its release. It is truly a unique experience that has created one of the most die-hard fan bases due to the impact that this game has on the player. Now, why am I making a video about Bloodborne now if it's been out for nearly a decade? Well, I'm sure there are many players that have recently got into the Souls style of games due to the wide success of Elden Ring and its newly released DLC. Maybe you are looking for another game to try and itch that urge for more content, or maybe you just want to hear me talk about a game that you loved in the past. No matter the reason, today I will be going over why Bloodborne is a must-play or replay in 2024. I am sure that many of you have a good sense of what a Souls game looks like by now. It's hard, it has big tough bosses, and an unforgiving but beautiful world. So I'm not going to be re-explaining what makes this game a Souls title in depth, rather I will be going over what makes it unique from the other titles, what is different about this game, and what makes it an experience that is still worth your time a decade later. Bloodborne's combat is much different compared to the other titles. It has a much faster paced and aggressive combat system at its core. It makes use of a rally mechanic that only appears in this title. Basically, when you get hit, you have a short window to hit the enemy back in order to regain part or all of that missing health before you lose it forever. This brings a risk-reward system into play. The player has to decide if they should go back in and try and regain some of their health, or if they should play it safe and retreat to use the more traditional method of healing being blood vows. This mechanic supports the aggressive combat system well, allowing the player to stay in the action longer before needing to retreat and heal. You also have the typical dodge roll as a method of avoiding attacks. However, this is only the case when you are not locked onto an enemy. If locked on, your dodge button changes into a quick step. In order to get the most out of this feature, it is helpful to mix up locking on and off of an enemy depending on what dodge may be better for the situation. Although if that seems like too much of a hassle, you can still get away with just using one or the other. Like I mentioned earlier, this combat is fast, especially with the more humanoid enemies you fight. They often have access to the same weapon and dodges you have, resulting in very quick gameplay, always keeping you on your feet. Now, for probably one of the most iconic features of Bloodborne, its weapons. First off, in one hand you hold your trick weapon. These are weapons unique to Bloodborne and are able to change form. Each and every one of these weapons are unique and offer different advantages and disadvantages depending on their form. They could offer more range, stronger attacks, or even new moves. They also each have unique transforming attacks, expanding your available attack options even further. Definitely a huge part of making the combat feel as good as it does. In your other hand, you hold your gun. Now, I know, why are guns in my Souls game? Well, they actually provide a very niche use. Normally, when you think of a gun, it is stronger than your typical melee weapon. Well, in Bloodborne, besides a few exceptions, they are not used for damage as they do nearly nothing. Instead, they are used as a parry mechanic. Most enemies can be parried if you shoot them right before they attack. This causes them to slump over and opens up a huge window to get off a visceral attack, and also allows you a chance to get follow-up attacks in. This is a super fun mechanic that is definitely a big factor in differentiating the combat in this game from the rest of the franchise. The last notable aspect of this combat unique to this game relates to the bosses you fight. Specific bosses, mostly the big monstrous ones, are able to have their limbs broken if you hit them enough times. This is yet another way for you to break up the aggressive pacing of this game and can be another strategy you can employ to beat your enemies. The combat in this game is definitely one of the qualities that drags me back every couple of months. Perhaps Bloodborne's most defining aspect is its incredible world design. Instead of taking place in a medieval setting like most of the other games, Bloodborne's world is a dark and gothic creation. You will roam the streets with arguably the best fashion in all of Souls. You are trapped in this horrifying yet beautiful dream, quite literally being a hunter of the night. Each new area you discover adds to this terrifying yet beautiful world in a variety of different ways. The world itself is also interconnected in many different areas, making it extremely rewarding to explore. To further reward the player, there are secret areas that feature some of the best bosses in the game. There are actually very few bosses you are required to fight in order to beat the game, so this extra exploration is what will lead you to even more content. I honestly find it laughable how confident From Software must be to hide some of the most beautiful locations behind such obscure methods of getting there. They know they created a masterpiece no matter what you find. This game is also one that follows the less checkpoints, more shortcuts route. I like this approach, and it certainly matches this game very well. It forces the player to look for elevators, doors to open, or ladders to drop in order to make those boss runbacks more manageable. You will often discover even more secrets while looking for these shortcuts as well. The enemies are all unique and offer different experiences fighting each one. I never felt as if I saw an enemy too much or that one was too annoying to fight. I will say though, without a doubt, my favorite enemies and bosses are the humanoid ones. Just like you, they are hunters. Sometimes they are thrown in the middle of a level, or even the boss of the area. These fights are always fast-paced and are very hard to predict. They use weapons that you may have seen before and will shoot you down in between attacks, offering a much different experience than the more monstrous enemies seen in the rest of the game. The world of Bloodborne offers yet another mechanic to make it even more interesting, that being insight. This is kind of like a stat. As you explore the world, defeat bosses, or use items, you will gain insight. You can also spend insight as if it was a currency, as well as have it stolen from you by specific enemies. Different amounts of insight held offer different effects. Overall, they change the world around you. They can allow you to see new enemies, give different attacks to set enemies, allow you to see massive creatures, or even hear new sounds in some areas. It is a super cool addition and makes this massive, dark, and enticing world an ever-changing one. The last big aspect of this game I wanted to talk about today is the Old Hunters DLC. This is the one and only DLC that Bloodborne has received, but damn is it a good one. Most fans consider some of the best bosses, areas, and weapons to come out of this DLC, and they are right. You have a ton of new trick weapons, new guns, and even more fashion. Every single boss in this DLC, except one, has left an amazing memory in my mind. The DLC also ends with one of the hardest fights that From Software has crafted, so if you're itching for a challenge, you will definitely find it. A perfect addition to the base game, and even gave us more music to add to the already peak soundtrack that this title offers. Like I said, this video was just to cover what I think makes Bloodborne stand out from the Souls titles. There are still a ton of aspects that it shares with the other games that, if you loved them in the other titles, you definitely will here. If you won't take my word for it, take the word of one of the most passionate communities in gaming who just won a 60 FPS remake, or if they're lucky, a sequel. For now, it does not look like that's gonna happen, so in the meantime, go play Bloodborne if you haven't, and if you have, I don't care, go play it again. With that, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and until next time.